On a windy day when you're trying to fly cast, do you find yourself casting harder and harder, but getting casts that go shorter and shorter? Got a little bit of a breeze today. I'm going to show you what happens when you do this from a perspective maybe you haven't seen, and show you how you can make more effective casts into the wind. I'm Chris Myers, Orlando Fly Casting Lessons in Central Florida Sight Fishing Charters. Thanks for checking out my channel. I got lots of fly casting instructional videos on this channel, and you can come see me for a one-on-one fly casting lesson if you're going to be in Central Florida, or I can also evaluate your cast via video. Let's get over to the water and show exactly what happens when you try harder but get a worse result. Today I have a breeze that's coming directly at me at the moment, so it's a perfect time to show what happens if you do not have proper line speed and a tight enough loop when you're trying to cast into the wind. So there's lots of things you can get away with when it's completely calm, and you may be able to at least get a significant amount of line to straighten, but as soon as the wind blows, all that falls apart and is no longer going out like you wanted. So let's show what happens when I try to cast harder into the wind. If I have open loops to begin with, if I just make a cast at my normal speed with an open loop, the fly is up here, you have a big straight piece of leader and fly line, and then a huge dip, and then it comes back up to my tip. All that is pushing into the breeze and trying to straighten out, but the direction of travel of that thing is around. It's not into the wind, it's around in a curve, and that's what happens. It gets crushed and falls like that. So then when it's not straightening out, people generally start to try to cast harder. So as I cast harder, you can see that it even put more of a dip into my line. So when you cast harder and harder in fly casting, you bend the rod more and more and more, and the more bend I put into this rod, the more it's going to counterflex, straighten out, and counterflex down the other way. And the rod does this after you stop moving it. So if I'm going back, it's bent, bent, bent. When I stop it, it unloads, it bends down to the ground, and right there, it sends the line coming out of the tip down into the ground in front of me. Same exact thing happens behind. So now that you're aware of that, let's look at a couple strokes that are doing that in regular and then in slow motion, and see if you can identify that occurring. Here, now let's watch that again in slow motion, and you can really see how overbent that rod is and how it is completely destroying any chance at a candy cane, J-shape, narrow, effective loop. In our overpowered cast, you can see in slow motion how that rod tip is bent so much right here that the stored energy is going to force it to counterflex down. Look at that amount of down. So now the following loop is going to be super wide and open, and now I'm going to have to pull all that sag out of that loop, wasting the stroke going back. So I'm wasting all that to there, getting the line straight. It's already on the water, so I have to snatch it off the water as well, which means I had to do it really hard in the back. There's another one in the front. You can see how the wind is going to crush that, because there's so much line trying to push into that wind in a vertical orientation right there. So, and you can see how it jumped back and created slack on the delivery. So now we know what happens when you cast harder into the wind, what it does to your loop. Now it's very important to ask yourself, well, why am I feeling the need to cast harder to begin with? And it's almost always because the loops are not tight enough to begin with. Even when it's calm, the line speed is not enough that it allows the loop to straighten out so that when you change directions, you immediately begin pulling on a tight line. So if under normal circumstances, this is my cast, and you can see all the sag in here that I'm never really getting the rod tips, the line straight before I change directions, that means all that next stroke is wasted pulling that sag out of my line. So really, I only get maybe 1/2, 1/3, something less than a full effective stroke. So we'll call an effective stroke one where the line is fully straight. So it's fully straight behind us and in front of us before we change directions. Now. So those are effective strokes where I'm making the next pull on an immediate tight line, as opposed to casts that are like this, which are not effective. I'm coming way up here. So on that back cast that has the sag, I'm essentially coming all the way up to here to pull the sag out. Now I'm starting my attempt at an effective stroke, but I really have nowhere else to go in a straight line except to there. So I'm forced to pull the tip down to the water, which is going to pull the bottom part of that loop apart, and it's going to direct my cast down here into the water instead of out there where I would like it to go. Neither of which are helping me make an effective cast. So if I'm doing this, I'm telling that to go right here, go right there, but it can't straighten out because this is where I'm telling it to go. Now, if you put a little time and effort into it, you can probably practice making some casts that look like that, and that went out farther. It still is not straight. I can almost got it straight. I got it out pretty far though. Now that just doing that in itself doesn't look very fun or effective. There's something that I want to do for any length of time. So the solution to all this is not to be casting harder. It is to be casting narrow loops that go in the direction I want them to go, which is out there, and are made across a straight line. When you start overbending that rod, your tip is dipping way down below the straight line on the front and the back, and it will be impossible for me to make those narrow loops. I come up in the back, out in the front, up in the back, out. That cast straightened out because I told it to go out there. I finished along this straight line. So here's my yellow straight line on the sky. My tip is going back and forth across that. I must stop out here, allow that cast to form. Then I can follow through if that's what we need to do for fishing purposes. Maybe where you fish, you don't need to or you don't want to. Drop that tip down, so you might finish right here. That's where the cast is made. The cast is only made from here to here along that line. The cast is not made aiming down here into the water. So when you have this wind coming at you and you want to make more effective cast, you got to stay on that straight line, and if you find it ridiculously difficult to do so in a more overhead manner, you can come down here sidearm. I find that it's a lot of times easier for people not to drive this down, because then you would have to come up and over the top. That's how a lot of you, I think, will find that you have been finishing your cast, is you come, cast, delivery. Well, when you're down here in sidearm, if I just keep going out this way, I would have to change and come over to make that delivery. You see what that breeze just did? It blew it on the other side of me, and it's not even 2 rod lengths away. So I didn't even make an 18-foot cast doing that. If I stay sidearm and I go into that wind, into the wind, I'm going straight. That one fully straightened out all the way out there because I finished in that straight line. Now, the only difference between that cast and any other one I make is how much I'm going to bend my elbow. So now I bend my elbow here, I could put it here, I could put it there. Wherever you want to hold the rod is the best place to do so. There is no perfect spot where you need to be pointing it in any particular direction. I can go from the sidearm, start bending my elbow, bend my elbow, And with no hauling, with one hand, this will go directly into the wind and straighten out because I'm going on straight lines. Now, if you got a ton of wind, you want to generate even more line speed, then you can start doing hauling, double hauling. I have another video on that, so we won't go into doing that today. But first and foremost, you must stop burying that tip down into the water on the delivery, or trying to add line speed by just cranking as much power as you can into your casting hand. When you stop doing that and start going in straighter lines, making tighter loops, you'll be able to overcome wind with ease.